from the college by the lake, meeting the personalities and discussing the issues that affect all of Coeur d'Alene and the inland Northwest. We are the North Idaho College Public Forum. And now here's your moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
Welcome to the North Idaho College Public Forum. It's a very special privilege for me as the host and program producer to welcome to our program today the Honorable Sheri Barnard, who is the mayor of the city of Spokane, Washington. As many of our viewers know, particularly here in eastern Washington, the mayor of the city of Spokane has recently been on a trip to Ireland and the Soviet Union, and we want to provide this opportunity for her to report to the people of her city about that trip and what she learned and what impacts that can have for the city of Spokane and the neighboring areas in the future. Our guest was elected to the city council in Spokane in 1984 and served for 6 years and was elected the mayor in 1989 and has completed or almost completed the first 2 years of a 4-year term. As always, Mayor Barnard, it's a pleasure to have you on our program.
Thank you. It's nice to be here to talk about such an important subject, Tony. I appreciate it very much.
Well, we're delighted to have you here, and I'm very happy to welcome back to the program a regular panelist who's been with us over the years, and she's been busy recently and has not been able to be on our program, Idaho State Senator Mary Lou Reed, and I would like to invite Senator Reed to commence the questioning.
Thank you, Tony. This is a special treat for me because I've known Mayor Barnard for years and years and years, long before she was the Honorable Mayor and I was the Honorable Senator, so it's a real treat, Sheri.
You're not going to, this report isn't going to be like McLaughlin report, is it?
No,
where you
no.
both start yelling at me?
No, not at all. This is
oh,
all
good.
friendly.
I can relax. Oh, good.
And my first question really has to do with Spokane Sister City program. How many sister cities does Spokane have? And I know you've been off to see a couple of them.
Mm-hmm. We have 5 sister cities. And I really relish this opportunity to share why I believe our sister city program is so important. You probably know, and most of our viewers know because it's been discussed so much, that 30 years ago, Nishinomiya, Japan became our first sister city. And I really need to go back and look at the records about probably the controversy that went on when Nishinomiya became a sister city. And yet over those 30 years with Ed Tsudakawa, Mayor Fausine, and so many others, the relationship has grown stronger and stronger. Most mayors have gone to Japan as they've served their term. But I think the most important thing now is after 30 years, the exchange that's taking place economically. You know, people seem to say, well, what are we getting out of it so often?
What are the benefits? I think that's a good question.
Well, there are so many more benefits.
A
lot of people look at economics only. So besides the economics, which I want to touch on, I think some of the most important things are the cultural, the education, the people-to-people relationship, and I think that is the most important thing. But now we're looking at economics, and of course, I don't know whether you've had the opportunity to be at Mukagawa University, but it's the old Fort Wright College, and what they have done, they have put in a couple of $1 million. They've, rehabilitated the place. They have a cultural school out there, cultural kind of museum. Anybody is welcome to go there. And Mrs. Takeoka runs it. Her husband is the professor. They teach Japanese lessons, Japanese cooking. They want the community to come and visit them. But not only that, we have 500 students a year coming to Spokane who are going downtown and spending money. Their parents are coming, and that's just a small part. We have Asia University. We have Sumitomo Lumber Company, which we have a joint venture in Spokane. And when the mayor, I went to Japan last year, and you go and visit all these people, it is an honor for them if the mayor comes and they show you everything and you communicate. Then when they come back, they come see you. It's a long relationship. With our other relationships in our new sister cities, we won't take 30 years.
Well, tell me what the other sister cities are.
The other sister cities, the second one was Lübeck, Germany, and I just had a visitor, Captain Nymphy, who's the head of Lübeck, in my office this morning. What a glorious man, and who wants to improve economic ties, and we're going to have a newsletter back and forth, and of course he wants the mayor to come and visit Lübeck. Everybody wants the mayor to come.
And you will.
And I said,
plan on going,
let's take
right?
some time, let's see how this all plays out and what happens. But Jilin, China, Mayor McNeil, I believe, went to Jilin. Mm-hmm. Yes, right. I think she went there. I can't imagine going to China. That would be amazing. And then I left on September 21st, 70 of us left and went to Limerick, Ireland. And a year ago, some people came to me and said, we really need the mayor to go to Limerick, Ireland. It's time. A mayor has never been. And they're having a huge Spokane Day, a ceremony where they named a lovely walk, right by the Shannon River. They named it for Spokane. And we had the treaty signing of the 300th treaty of a battle that was finally ended, and they opened King John's Castle.
And this was all while you were there?
Yes, it was. It was an
17
amazing.
of you?
There were 70.
70?
70 people who went from Spokane who were there. The relationship between Ireland and Spokane is great. Well, after that, those 70 people were on vacation. They stayed in Ireland or traveled, played golf or whatever. But my husband and I and Ray and Gloria Betts and then Bob Scott, who's our international director, left from there, and in between each of us took a couple of days off, but went on, left from and went to Moscow. And from Moscow, we were just there overnight. It was very rapid. We just saw it so fast that the only thing that I remember is the shooting, the place where the students were shot, or the 3 people were shot. We saw that, and then we saw McDonald's and the line around McDonald's, which was unbelievable. And we went on to Makhachkala, our sister city. We spent 4 days there, which I will never forget, and I feel so privileged for us, our city, that we have a sister city in Russia, not in any of the outlying republics, but in Russia.
Well, you're certainly sold on the whole idea of having sister cities, but how do you manage to have your staff and yourself keep up with these kinds of international relations?
It's interesting that we have so many guests from Japan and Germany and all of it. They're always coming to Spokane. And we've had 3 delegations of government officials from Makhachkala coming. So Bob Scott handles that, but we have to have a strong foundation. Each sister city needs a strong body of citizens who care about it. And
here in Spokane.
Yes, here in Spokane. And they're the ones that do the work, that entertain people. Plus, I've appointed 1 council member to head up each sister city, because the mayor cannot do it all. For instance, Katie Rakowski is in charge of Japan, and thank goodness, because the Japanese are coming and going, and she represents me when I can't be there. But the future relies on global economics. We had a speaker at a recent workshop with the Chamber, Seattle Chamber, Robert Reich from Harvard. He said this has become a global economy, and if your city isn't talking internationally and doing international work, you're not with the time. So it's an exciting time.
I know that you brought with you today, Mayor, some photographs, a couple of them, from your trip to the Soviet Union, and I'm going to ask our crew if they will put that up at this time on the screen. And in so doing, I'll have you describe this first photograph that is going up on the screen now.
Okay, I think it's when we arrived and Mayor Ilyasov met us. And when we flew from Moscow to Makhachkala, it was very crowded, Aeroflot, scary, very scary. The tires are run down, the planes are run down. You think, do they keep the engines up? And it's just packed. And when you arrive at the airport, nobody gets up, nobody moves until the pilot gets out. Well, then the mayor, I saw some people out there and I thought, I think maybe that might be for us. The mayor came, they had a band. They had 3 lovely women in their beautiful outfits with the bread. It's so important. It was the first mayor ever to come to Makhachkala. So they made everybody else on the plane sit down until the Americans got off, which I was very embarrassed. So we got off and we met Mayor Ilyasov. And I might add, Mayor Ilyasov right now is in a very controversial position. He has been to Spokane for the signing. But November 22nd is a new election, and this is what's happening in Russia right now with all the change. As democracy is coming, and now they're having elections. So there was quite a bit of political maneuvering when we were over there with another man that was here, Cordon, and he's running for mayor. And once he found out we were in town, he didn't know we were in town. Once he saw me on television, he was everywhere we were the rest of the time we were there.
So you had both candidates
Yes.
looking for your attention and support.
And we couldn't quite understand what was going on behind the scenes. And we also didn't have an interpreter when we first arrived.
That sounds a lot like American politics, though. Everyone trying to get some attention
Right.
of visitors. You have a second photograph that you brought with you that you had on the trip. And would you describe this particular
That's just
one?
that is a photograph when we went to a folklife festival the day we arrived. It was wonderful. They just happened to be having it. I wanted to explain that Makhachkala is a part of an autonomous republic called Dagestan. It's very hard to find any information about it because it is a part of Russia. It is not a separate republic. But the interesting thing about Makhachkala, and it's Makhachkala, is that Shamil is their hero. And Shamil is what we have a statue of. Anatoly, a famed sculptor in Russia, brought us a sculpture which we'll be putting in Riverfront Park. And Shamil fought the Russians for 25 years. He didn't win, but he's still the hero. And that it's right down by the Caspian Sea, so that the Turks and the Russians used to fight, and this is a center of what was much fighting. But they have 7 different cultures, total ethnic variety there, like Muslims. This was a wonderful, wonderful folk show where they celebrate their history and their heritage, and they get out their costumes, and they have all the different cultures dancing, and they were so privileged that we were there. They made us come right up front and sit in chairs, and it was an incredible experience.
One thing I've learned already from your report today is that for the small amount of money that you spend from the city of Spokane to go, you're really talking much revenue that's coming back, like through the schools or universities are here, and also there seems like it's almost an obligation for you to promote and encourage that kind of economic infusion into the economy of Spokane.
You know, it's interesting when we fight over such a small amount of money. I think one of my council members that's criticized me has flown back and forth to Seattle 6 times on his own business, which is about what my trip cost. And it was, my part of the trip was probably $2,000 because I paid for most of it. Or once we get to Ireland, Makachkala, they pick up all your expenses, hotel and everything. So it is a small part considering the millions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of dollars it brings back. But that isn't the only thing. I think it's what's changed the Soviet Union. There are many sister cities in the Soviet Union, and I've read many articles in Christian Science Monitor that it's Americans going to the Soviet Union and this kind of exchange that has helped turn this coup over.
With all these cultural exchanges, a lot of students go and faculty and so forth. It has introduced a lot of the ideas of what's going on, and one could safely say, I think, help bring about the unrest and the revolution that is coming. It is a revolution.
It is.
Before we go back to Senator Reed, I did have one question. I've read a report in the newspaper about how excited you were. I've been there twice, of course, not as recent as you, and the revolution had not come to the extent it has now, but that you were just overwhelmed by what people were saying and the new experience of freedom. Would you share with your constituents in Spokane some of your observations about how they're responding to this change?
I'd like to quickly tell you 2 stories that were amazing. One of the ministers from Spokane went to Makachkala, and I signed a Bible, and they took the Bible over. That was probably 6 months ago. I'm not exactly sure when it was, to some of the ministers over in Makachkala. And so while I was in my hotel in Makachkala, all of a sudden somebody brought in a minister, and he looked so poor and so pale, but he was so thrilled. He came to see me. He wanted me, and I haven't done it yet, he wanted me to call the minister. I think it was Dennis Sunderland that had taken the Bible, but he wanted me to call him, tell him how much he'd appreciate it. And so we talked a little about his church and what, we have a lot of Russians coming to Spokane area now. They're refugees, they're evangelicals. And he wanted to tell me that this was a miracle, that he could come in my hotel room and talk to an American. It was a very moving experience. And then the Mayor Ilyasov, set us up for a dinner in a restaurant, and it was with all the businessmen. 2 women were there and other businessmen, and they were so eager to talk about business. They wanted to know, how do you go into business for yourself? What do you do? Because some of them were members of the Communist Party. Communism is gone. And a lot of these people told us, we're so glad it's gone. We've never thought like this, and it's so easy for us, but now we want business. So I had my husband tell them what it is when you're in business for yourself. You have to have the capital to start the business, or, get it, borrow it. You go out and you get the job, you do the work, and then you have to go get the money to get paid for it. That is what small business is. And I said, yes, and when you're in business for yourself, you don't miss work on Monday. Because when you miss work, you don't get paid. And they want to come. A banker gave me a picture to put in my office, and he said, I want you to look at that picture every day, Mayor, and know that we want to do business with you. So Katie Rakowski is over in Makachkala right now. They're having a conference of women of vision. There's 4 women from Spokane, a number of women from the Washington State, women from China, Ireland. It's a whole delegation with women from all over Russia to learn how women can improve themselves.
Senator Reed.
Well, did you have any sense of the status of women right there in the village or the town that you were visiting?
It's very different, of course, because this is a Muslim country. So the women are not, even though they don't wear masks or anything like that, wear their face, the veil. I think women work very hard over there. The only time we really ran into women was, one woman was an interpreter for the mayor. She runs the English-speaking school. I found the women in the schools to be lovely, bright, teaching the children but I think their struggle is much harder than, in times to come also, because they could not believe a woman was mayor, and they were giving me a hard time, some of them, like, how does your husband stand this? Fortunately, before he came home, my husband had a few toasts with him and he became their brother. But they couldn't believe that a woman could be mayor, even though, so there's a lot of change to come. And what we have to do, and what I learned, is we don't go over there and try to change them. What we do is share with them. We take letters. They think we're perfect. I said, look, we are not perfect. We have many problems. But we all working together, sharing ideas, that's how we're going to change.
Well, you're such a positive ambassador, but certainly there were things that you saw that concerned you in terms of consumer availability of consumer goods, and
Yes.
what kind of prognosis do you have for the economy of that particular area?
In particular, Moscow was very depressing to me. It was just gray. Everything was dirty. And the traffic, I was shocked. It was
I didn't
so,
think they had that many cars.
Oh, it was absolutely horrible, and especially when we were trying to leave, when we came back and reached the airport. The rain was just pelting. It was gray, and so the traffic was so bad. But the stores were very sad. I mean, we went into a fish market, and it was dirty, and it just smelled. But the bread, they had a nice bread market. But nothing's like ours. Nothing is clean. And someone was telling me, now that they have democracy, they can't force people to sweep the streets and work anymore. So there's kind of a rebellion going on where people are saying we don't have to do that.
And supposedly it was the grandmothers anyway with the
the
brooms.
Oh, and we walked to Gorky Park. My husband and I walked to Gorky Park, which was very run down. The playground equipment, was bad. But in Makhachkala, they live on the Caspian Sea. It was very hot. Men are fishing from the Caspian Sea all the time and catching their fish. They have a lot of vegetables, the best tomatoes you ever tasted, caviar, they make their own brandy. So while their food situation isn't as serious, their buildings and everything are run down so terribly, and they're interested in building up their infrastructure. We talk about our problems. So I'm hoping one of the most important things we're going to do is have exchanges of people who are engineers that can come over here and learn from us on infrastructure, or we can go over there. There are so many ways that we can exchange. But the one thing they had, Mary Lou, that was absolutely beautiful were their children. As always, we went to a nursery school, and they had the children standing outside waiting for us, dressed in their lovely costumes, and they were so beautiful, and took us in. We talked with the teachers. We're going to exchange. They want some books. They need materials. But the love of their children is, I think, almost, and their care is almost more paramount to them than the way we treat some of our children in this country. We might learn from them culture, ethnic value. But it was interesting when children were dancing, and one of the Makhachkalan teachers said to me, "That little girl over there is a Russian." See, they don't think of themselves as Russians. Then we had a privilege of going to the English-speaking schools where the children sang us English songs. And of course, you might know I took many postcards from the citizens of Spokane. I asked them to send messages. And wherever I went in Russia, I handed out these postcards with pictures of Spokane and messages, plus English letters from all our children from the schools to their children.
So there was a language exchange as well as people exchange.
It was marvelous.
A little bit more about this first taste of democracy that you were saying. I'm intrigued by the fact that the mayor was going to have to face a challenger, and so could you tell that whether or not they had any kind of campaign techniques, or how are they responding to?
I think they do it through the news, and it was the campaign was just warming up. But Mayor Eliasov was it was obvious that he was very nervous, and according to what we were told, this man, he comes from a bigger party, Korban, so we weren't there. But one thing I found is that those people stand in line by the hour to buy a newspaper, whether it's in Makhachkala or Moscow. They are well-read people. And one story going around was that they're so excited to get their Moscow news, or whatever in Moscow, the Moscow news, that they call each other up on the phone. Hedrick Smith was saying this in his new book, The New Russians, that he had a hard time reaching his friends when he went back because they're all on the phone talking about the news. And the Moscow news, which used to be just full of propaganda, is now telling the truth. And so this one Russian Moscovite called up another one and said, "Did you get a newspaper today?" And he said, "Yes, I did," sort of with a smug pride. And he said, "Well, what does it say? Tell me what the news is today." And the other gentleman on the other line thought for a minute, and he says, "I can't talk about it on the phone." I mean, they're still getting used. They're still getting used to the idea of not being able to talk and exchange and not being afraid of each other.
But you would assume that they had not always been standing in line for the newspaper, that this is a recent occurrence because there now is news and it isn't
they have
controlled?
always been reading, from what I'm gathering, and I don't know how they do this, but there are underground newspapers. There always have been. Those people have, and they don't even trust each other, but there's been a revolution, quiet revolution going on. And like I say, I wasn't there long enough to learn, but I want to read, I want to study. It says my daughter said she graduated in Slavic languages and she went to Russia, this is 10 years ago, and traveled by herself, she was on a camping trip, and she said, the more I know about Russia, the more I know I don't know. And I noticed in the paper just the other day, they signed a treaty for economic development among, I think it's 9 countries. So it will be interesting to watch, and I am very positive. I know a lot of people say, oh, it's going to be horrible and all this, but those people are ready to change. And when, the human mind, when it decides to do something and be creative, it's amazing what they can do. And I think the entrepreneurial types will help bring the others along. But one thing I know, they have to be willing to work hard to get anywhere, and that's what some people say they don't want to do. My heart goes out to them, because I loved being downtown in Moscow. These men, older men in their suits, dignified, proud. They love their country. They don't want to leave. They want to see it become what it is. And so I was watching these men walk in the dirty street, and thinking they have to wait in line for whatever they get, but they are so dignified.
Mayor, you must have talked to a number of people on this trip, not only there, but other places you were in Europe. And it is true that a revolution has come not only to the Soviet Union, but all Eastern Europe. And the real conflict between the Western world and the democracies, and the threat from that is just changed, just almost overnight. In any of those conversations, was there hope also that not only in their case, but in our case, that funds can be diverted from having to defend, with NATO and they with the Warsaw Pact, that funds can be used on other human needs other than having to put them in on such large defense budget?
Mm-hmm. I think that's always a given when you're talking one-on-one with people, although we just didn't have the time to dwell on that kind of subject. Mm-hmm. But I will tell you this, just this last week at the Chamber of Commerce, Seattle Chamber was over here at my table when they said, how can we solve some of the critical problems we have? One of the leading consensus was deploy military expenditures and resources and employees to taking care of our infrastructure and our problems. That is going to be a very hard thing to do, as you know, Tony, because of the power structure in Washington, D.C. And I think it's going to be up to all of us as citizens to say, we want to cut military spending appropriate to what we're looking at right now. And we are going to have to demand it, or it's not going to happen.
I have one other question on the Soviet Union that I was, as I said, there twice, and there for a little bit longer stay than you were on this particular trip. And one thing that I found in talking to people all over the areas that I was able to visit was the great fear they had of war and nuclear war. They experienced so much during World War II and the siege of what was Leningrad at the time. Mm-hmm. Did you sense any of the people this? Of course, the change is coming so drastically that there's a great reduction in threat of World War. But did you find that they were very concerned and frightened about?
I found they're filled with hope, and as in most countries, I visited El Salvador and Nicaragua. They love the people. They're just afraid of our leaders. It's really true, because they know us as Americans want peace, but they fret about what are some of the decisions that are made in Washington, D.C., and they worry about Washington, D.C. But I found hope. I was there such a short time, Tony, that I got into the classrooms with the children. We had our business meeting, and mostly they're concerned about business. How do I succeed? How do we help our community? I was at a wedding party where they have these weddings, and they bring out everything, caviar, and they celebrate and they dance. And so, as I say, I think it was a crime for me to have to go and visit these cities and only be there for such a short time for a lot of ceremony, even though we had business discussions. But the feeling permeating everybody that went, and people we talked to in Russia, and we met people from all over that are in Russia trying to do business. Joint ventures are it. If anybody wants to do joint ventures, this is the time to go to Russia and do it. And start anyway. And Kachkala already trusts us, so we have a relationship. Mostly when we talked to people, it was not about the past, it was looking to the future. And the people we talked to were enthusiastic, creative, and just searching. Oh, and I talked to a couple of 55-year-old men, very young of course, but they are so excited that that this is happening while they're able to see it and be a part of it. The enthusiasm we found in Makhachkala was wonderful, but they're not that crazy about Gorbachev in Makhachkala, of course, needless to say, or Yeltsin.
Senator Reed.
Well, what would you like to see personally as a follow-up, Mayor Barnard? What would you, I'm sure you have your own agenda of people you'd like to bring over, people you'd like to exchange, to send over ideas that you may have?
One of the things I'm looking at doing after, we are going to have the entire Sister City program before the City Council on November 18th. There was so much controversy about my trip, and not only that, there always is at budget time, that we felt it was time to bring the Sister City program before the council. You know, I've always wanted the council to know when I take a trip, but they never expressed much interest. So this community is talking about Russia, and I think it's wonderful. And this controversy of me going has raised the awareness level of everybody in Spokane. And I was talking to Joe McBride, who heads up the Makhachkala Sister City group, and he said, Sheri, I know that you've really gotten a lot of heat on this trip, but boy, is our phone ringing. We have more people that want to be involved. What I'd like to see is more people involved in the Sister City program. I also would like to see more Sister Cities. In the last few days, I've talked to people. Of course, my daughter works for U.S. El Salvador Sister Cities, and in fact will be coming to Spokane with a woman who recently escaped from El Salvador. Americans have made a difference in El Salvador, citizens, by being there. Mexico, I was talking to some people from, wherever it is, they want us to have a sister city. Well, we have to be careful with that because we want to be able to take care of them. Seattle has 18 sister cities, and it can get out of hand if you have too many. But I want to bring Volodya to Spokane. Volodya is a young student who wants to come, and he wants to go to school, and I would like him to be a start of an exchange. He's from Makhachkala, and we have exchanges already going with Ireland. Eastern Washington's doing a lot with the Japanese, so it's coming, it's growing a lot.
But your first step is really to have a review and to really have the entire council examine it and bring a little bit more.
And support it. Either support it or say we don't want it. As someone said to me the other day, if you're going to have sister city relationships, you have to return the visits. If you don't want to do it, then let's not do it. But one other thing I wanted to mention, what I'm looking at right now and talking to a lot of people, is appointing an international commission, which would be made up of about 9 people that are made up of the business community, people who are interested in international trade, and 1 representative of each of our sister cities, so that we can be a strong body moving forward. And if you'd like to make it a region, we'd love to have you.
With that note, we'll have to bring the permanent conclusion. We can pursue this maybe on a future program. Mayor Barnard, thank you so much for being with us in this report on your most recent trip.
Thank you, Tony.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed our program, and I thank Senator Reed for her fine questions. Hope you will be with us again next week at the same time. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
North Idaho College Public Forum is videotaped live by Telemedia Services on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to catch the North Idaho College Public Forum the same time next week on this television station.